Let me tell you something right now. B, nothing changes until you decide you are responsible for everything. I'm not talking about blame. I'm not talking about guilt. I'm talking about ownership. There is a difference. Ownership means you stop pointing fingers. It means you stop waiting for the government, your boss, your parents, your spouse, or your past to fix your life. Ownership is the moment your life shifts from you reaction to E, creation. High performers, those people you admire, those who rise above, who build extraordinary lives, who create businesses, movements, impact. They don't sit around waiting for someone to give them permission. They don't sit in the corner hoping someone else makes a move. They own their time, they own their energy, they own their choices, their results, and even their failures. They say, I created this, and if I created this, I can change it. Most people spend their lives outsourcing responsibility. They say things like, I would be in shape if I had more time, or I'd be successful if I had the right connections, or I'd be happy if my past wasn't so painful. But high performers, people who make things happen, they flip the script. They don't say, I could if. They say, I must, so I will. That shift right there, that's power. That's freedom. You can't control everything that happens to you, but you are 100% responsible for how you respond. That's the edge. That's where the power lies. And when you claim that responsibility, you move from being a prisoner of circumstance to the author of your future. Victims wait for luck. Leaders create their break. Owners build momentum when others sit in confusion. I've met thousands of people who have every reason to fail. They had rough upbringings, broken homes, trauma, no support system, but they made a decision to rise, a decision to take ownership of their outcomes. And you know what happens when someone owns their life? They stop negotiating with weakness. They stop arguing for their limitations. They stop indulging in excuses and start demanding results. Ownership means you stop saying, I can't help, no. You can't help it. You just haven't taken the wheel yet. Ownership is the inner voice that says, I might be responsible for the storm, but I am responsible for whether I build a shelter or sit in the rain and complain. It's a mentality that separates high performers from the herd. Think about the word responsibility. It's not a burden. It's a power. It literally means the ability to respond. It means no matter what happens, you have the ability to respond in a way that moves you forward. That's a superpower, not a sentence. People think taking ownership means carrying a weight. No, it means finally putting your hands on the steering wheel instead of being tossed around by life like a leaf in the wind. And here's the truth, most people don't want to hurt as long as you blame. You stay stuck. Every time you blame someone else, you give away your power. Every time you say, it's not my fault, you're really saying, I'm not in control. And if you're not in control, guess what? Nothing's going to change. High performers take ownership not just when things go right, but especially when things go wrong. They don't look around for someone to take the fall. They step up. That's on me. I missed it. I dropped it, and I will fix it. And in that moment, when others would run, hide, point fingers, they lead. That's what makes them different. That's what builds trust, reputation, confidence. Ownership is the root of all growth. When you live in ownership, your mindset changes. You stop saying, why is this happening to me? And start saying, what can I learn this? What does this teach me? How can I use this? That's the frame high performers live in. They don't just go through things, they grow through things. And that only happens when you take ownership. So I ask you, what in your life are you still blaming on someone else? What results are you tolerating because it's easier to make excuses than to confront the truth? Or are you still waiting for permission to change? You want power, you want results, you want to rise? Then own everything of it, not just your wins, not just your effort, but the outcomes, the patterns, the mindset, the habits, the actions and inactions. Own the story you've been telling yourself. Own the one you're going to write next. Because until you do, you'll always be at the mercy of something outside yourself. And that's not where high performers live. They live in creation, not reaction. They don't wait for the world to shift. They become the shift. They become the cause, not the effect. And the moment they decide to own it all, everything changes because now they're playing from a place of power, not passivity. And let me tell you something about the people who rise, the ones who break through, the ones who defy the odds and create something extraordinary out of nothing. They don't live in limitation. They don't sit around calculating why something might not work. They are obsessed with possibility. They are wired to see potential where others see problems. Where most people see a wall, they see a ladder. Where most people see a dead end, they see a pivot point. That mindset isn't some gift. It's a decision. It's a discipline. It's a habitual way of thinking that separates the average from the extraordinary. Most people are conditioned to think in limitations. They've been trained since they were young. Be realistic. Don't get your hopes up. Stick to what you know. That program is poison to greatness. Limitation-based thinking is why it's why they lower their standards, shrink their dreams, and talk themselves out of their own potential. For high performers, those who create real impact, they train themselves to reject that mindset. They condition themselves daily to focus on what's possibly, not on what's in the way. They start with vision, big vision, not watered down, not halfway, not realistic. Realism doesn't lead revolutions, possibility does. Realism doesn't launch movements, possibility does. When you think in possibility, you don't need certainty to act. You just need a reason. You don't need a guarantee. You need hunger, you need drive. You need the courage to believe that something more is available, even if no one else sees it. That's what makes high performers dangerous. They're not limited by the same mental walls that stop others. It's not that they don't see the challenges, they see them clearly. They just don't stop there. They don't stare at the mountain and freeze. They start climbing. And when they hit an obstacle, they don't say, well, I guess that's it. No, they say, there's always a way. If I can't go through it, I'll go over it. If I can't go over it, I'll go over it. If I can't go around it, I'll break it down piece by piece until I move past it. That's possibility thinking. Do you know what possibility thinking does? It gives you energy, it gives you momentum, it creates a magnetic force inside you that pulls you forward, it unlocks creativity, it opens up ideas that limitation thinking can't even access. When you focus on what could be instead of what is, your brain starts working differently. You begin to notice opportunities that were invisible before. You start attracting the right people, the right resources, the right timing, not because the universe magically changes, but because who you do, your focus shifts, your beliefs expand, and you become someone who moves instead of waits. Most people only move when everything is lined up, when the risk is low, when the reward is guaranteed, when the outcome is safe. But high performers, they move before it makes sense. They make the leap before the net appears, not because they're reckless, but because they believe in their ability to figure it out. They believe that failure isn't the end. It's part of the process. That belief, that unshakable focus on what's possible, it's what gives them the edge. And understand this, possibility isn't just a mindset for goals. It's how they look at themselves. High performers don't define themselves by their past. They define themselves by their potential. They don't say, this is who I've always been. They say, this is who I'm becoming. That's how they keep evolving, they keep growing. They believe that their best is not behind them. It's still to come. That belief is what fuels the late nights, the early mornings, the sacrifices, the resilience. They aren't trying to repeat what they've done. They're obsessed with what they haven't done yet. Limitation thinking says, you're not qualified. Possibility thinking says, you can learn. Limitation says, no one's ever done that. Possibility says, then I'll be the first. Limitation says, what if I fail? Possibility says, what if I fly? That shift changes your life. Shift makes you dangerous in the best way, because once you start believing in what's possible, there's no going back. You can't unsee the potential. You can't unfeel the fire. And let me be clear, this isn't about fantasy. This isn't about wishful thinking or sitting around hoping things get better. High performers don't hope. They create, they build, they execute. But it all starts with a belief that something new, greater is possible. It starts with refusing to be boxed in by current circumstances. It starts with deciding that the future will not be dictated by the past. It starts with a mindset that says, there's more in me, there's more in this life, and I'm not settling until I find it. Let me break this down for you. High performers don't dabble. They decide they don't wake up and wonder what they'll do with their day. They know they operate with ruthless clarity and relentless intentionality. Every move they make, every word they speak, every commitment they accept, it's filtered through a powerful lens of you. Does this align with my vision? Does this get me closer to my mission? If it doesn't, they don't touch it. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. That level of decisiveness is what keeps them sharp, focused, and effective while the rest of the world is distracted, scattered, and spinning in circles. Clarity is power. Without it, you're just busy. Without it, you're reacting to life instead of building it. Most people don't lack time, they lack clarity. They don't know what they want, so they chase everything and catch nothing. They confuse motion with progress. They confuse productivity with purpose, but high performers, They define the target. They know exactly what winning looks like for them, not someone else's definition of success, theirs. And because of that, they're not easily shaken. They're not pulled into drama. They're not constantly reevaluating their path. Every time life gets hard, they have locked in on a direction and they are moving with intention, not impulse. Intentionality means you don't leave things to chance. You don't hope. Today is productive. You engineer it. You build your environment to support your focus. You design your routines, your habits, your schedule to reflect what actually matters. That's how high performers get more done in a day than most people do in a week. It's not because they have more hours. It's because they're using every minute like it counts. They've removed the fluff. They've stripped out the noise. They've built their life like an athlete trains their body on purpose, precision. You've got to understand clarity isn't just about goals. It's about identity. High performers are clear on who they are. They know their values. They know their standards. They know what they will and will not tolerate, not just from others, but from themselves. They don't negotiate with laziness. They don't entertain mediocrity. If they say they're going to do something, they follow through, not because someone's watching, because their E-word is law in their world. That kind of clarity becomes magnetic. It builds confidence. It builds momentum. People feel it when you walk in a room. You know where you're going. You're not wandering. You're not apologizing. You're not waiting for approval. You're moving with purpose. And here's the truth. Most people don't fail because they're not capable. They fail because they never got clear. They never defined the outcome. They never clarified the process. They never identified what mattered most, so they gave equal weight to everything. High performers don't fall into that trap. They prioritize with intensity. They protect their energy like it's gold. Because at U they understand the cost of distraction. They know every yes carries a price, so they guard their focus. They say no, often, firmly, and without guilt, because they're playing a bigger game. They're not chasing everything. They're building something that matters. You'll never be powerful if you're vague. You'll never be effective if you're reactive. Clarity gives you control. Intention gives you control. It's the difference between being busy and being strategic. And when you marry the two, when you live each day clear on what matters and you act with intention, you become unstoppable. Not because life is easier, but because you're not wasting your strength on things that don't serve you. You've stripped away the unnecessary. You've eliminated the distractions. You've drawn a line in the sand and said, this is who I am. This is where I'm going. And nothing is pulling me off course. People say they want success, but then they live by default. High performers live by design. They're not winging it. They're not reacting to emails all day. They're not letting other people's urgency dictate their priorities. They're proactive. They think ahead. They anticipate, they plan, they execute, they show up like it matters. Because to them, it does. They treat time as sacred. They treat energy as a currency. They treat their life like it's a mission, not a mess of random moments. That's what ruthless clarity and intentionality look like in action. And don't mistake clarity for comfort. Clarity doesn't mean it's easy. It means it's worth it. It means you know what mountain you're climbing, so you don't stop when the trail gets steep. You push through because your vision is stronger than your excuses. Your purpose is louder than your fear. You are not wandering in the dark. You are walking through with your eyes fixed on the outcome. That's the edge. That's what separates those who try from those who will transform. Pressure is not the enemy. Discomfort is not the problem. In fact, for high performers, well, pressure and discomfort are the path. If they don't avoid it, they don't run from it. They don't wish it away. They lean into it. They embrace it. Because they understand something that most people never grasp. Growth doesn't happen in the comfort zone. Transformation doesn't happen when things are easy. Greatness is forged in fire. It's born in tension. It's built through challenge, through struggle, through moments that stretch you past the point where the average person breaks. Most people have been conditioned to fear pressure, to think that stress is something to escape, that discomfort is something to numb, avoid, or medicate. But high performers are wired differently. They know that discomfort is feedback. It's a signal that something new is being demanded of them. And instead of shrinking from that, and they rise, because they know pressure reveals what's inside you. It exposes weakness, yes, but it also awakens strength. It brings the best out of you when you stop resisting it and start responding to it. Think about it. The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fires. Diamonds are formed under massive pressure. Muscles grow through tension and tearing. Everything in nature expands through resistance. Why would you be any different? High performers adopt this truth. It's uncomfortable, it's probably valuable. If it's heavy, it's probably helping. They train their nervous systems to face the storm, not flee from it. They get calm under chaos, focused under fire. They develop what others admire, grit, mental toughness, emotional resilience. Not by talking about it, but by going through what most people avoid. There's a reason they win. There's a reason they outlast the competition. It's not just talent, it's not luck. It's their relationship with pressure. While others melt, they sharpen. While others hide, they rise. While others complain, you choose to grow. And make no mistake, it is a choice. The discomfort will come. Life will press you. Challenges will show up whether you're ready or not. But how you respond, that's the dividing line. That's what makes or breaks you. And high performers make a habit of choosing strength over safety, choosing action over avoidance, choosing progress over protection. They don't sit around waiting for the perfect moment. They don't wait to feel ready. They act while their heart is pounding. They speak when their voice is shaking. They move when everything inside them says, play it safe. Because they know that safety is a liar. It will promise you peace, but steal your purpose. It will offer you ease, but rob you of evolution. That's why they don't chase comfort, they chase capacity. They want to see how far they can go, how deep they can dig, how much they can endure, adapt, and overcome, not to prove it to others, to prove it to themselves. Pressure is a privilege. It means you're in the game. It means you're doing something that matters. It means you're carrying weight because you can. High performers don't resent pressure. They respect it because they know it's not there to crush them. It's there to call something greater out of them. When life gets heavy, they don't say, why me? They say, try me, don't fold. They e-focus. They anchor themselves in vision and discipline, in habits that hold the line when emotion wavers. That's the difference. That's the edge. You don't get better without friction. You don't build discipline without resistance. You don't become a leader, a creator, a champion by living inside a padded room of predictable days. You become that person by doing the hard thing, the uncomfortable thing, the thing that demands more than you've ever given before. That's how confidence is built, from comfort, but from confronting discomfort and realizing it didn't break you, that you survived, that you adapted, that you got stronger. Confidence comes from evidence. And high performers collect evidence by willingly stepping into pressure again and again and again. They understand that discomfort is the cost of growth, and they're willing to pay it. Every rep, every rejection, every late night, every early morning, every decision that requires courage, it's all part of the process. They don't wish for it to be easier. They work to become better. They don't resent the weight. They e-train with it. They use it to build endurance, stamina, resilience. Because when it's game time, when the stakes are high and the lights are on, they're ready. Not because it's easy, but because they've lived in the hard. They've conditioned themselves to handle pressure like a professional, to turn pain into fuel, to turn discomfort into transformation, to turn pressure into performance. High performers are not just physically disciplined, they are mentally relentless. They understand that the mind is the command center. It's where every decision, every emotion, every action begins. And because they know that, they guard it, they train it, they feed it daily. Not once in a while, not just when things feel off. Every single day, they feed their mind with purpose because they understand something that the average person overlooks. Your mind will default to whatever you've been feeding it. If you're not intentionally filling your mind with empowering thoughts, strategies, insights, and vision, then it will be filled by whatever noise is around you. The negativity, the fear, the scarcity, the distractions of the world, they are always available, always on. If you're passive with your mind, it doesn't stay neutral. It decays, it weakens. And that weakness shows up in your life, in your focus, in your decisions, in your belief system. High performers refuse to let their mind become a dumping ground for garbage. They treat it like sacred territory. They fuel it with intention, reading, listening, learning, reflecting. They do it like they brush their teeth. It's a non-negotiable. They don't wait for motivation. They create it by feeding their mind with the content that shapes them into who they want to become. Whether it's books, audios, mentors, immersive environments, they seek out material that stretches them, challenges them, rewires them. And they do it consistently because growth isn't a one-time event. It's a lifestyle. Your life rises or falls to the level of your thinking. And your thinking rises or falls based on what you allow into your mind. High performers understand this at the deepest level. They know that the mind is like soil. Whatever you plant consistently will grow. If you feed it seeds of belief, discipline, and vision, you grow a mindset that supports success. But if you feed it doubt, excuses, or fear, you grow weeds. The question is, what are you planting? What are you watering? Because whatever you're consuming, you're becoming. The most dangerous thought patterns don't start as loud voices. They start as subtle suggestions, tiny ideas you accept over time. That's why high performers stay vigilant. They are always aware of what they consume. They filter their input. They don't just scroll aimlessly, watch mindlessly, or listen carelessly. They understand that what enters their mind shapes how they show up in the world. So they choose wisely. They choose material that lifts them, not limits them. That energizes, not exhausts. That builds their belief instead of breaking it down. It's not just about feeding the mind with positive things. It's about feeding the mind with far powerful things. Truth, strategy, discipline, wisdom. They don't just want hype, they want tools, they want depth, they want mastery. High performers study psychology, neuroscience, leadership, communication, business. They dig into the topics that give them an edge in life. Not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because they understand that when the pressure hits, you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your level of preparation. And your preparation is mental before it's ever physical. That's why they read things that challenge them. That's why they surround themselves with people who sharpen them. That's why they invest in their growth like it's oxygen. Because it is. In a world that's always trying to pull you toward distraction, toward mediocrity, toward comparison and comfort, the only way to stay grounded, to stay aligned with who you're becoming, is to actively, daily, feed your mind with truth and vision and perspective. You can't afford to be casual about your mental environment. Not if you want to lead, not if you want to grow, not if you want to live at your peak. Mental conditioning is the foundation. It's the first thing high performers go to when something feels off. They don't blame the outside world. They don't point fingers. They check their input. They ask, what have I been feeding my mind? Because they know your outer world will always reflect your inner world. If your mind is cluttered, your life will be chaotic. If your mind is focused, your life becomes powerful. If your mind is fed with vision, your life starts to expand in that direction. Not by accident, by design. And here's the truth, your mind is always being fed. The only question is, well, by what? If you don't control the input, the world will do it for you. It'll feed you fear. It'll feed you mediocrity. It'll feed you the idea that you should play it safe, stay small, settle for less. That's why high performers take responsibility. They feed their mind with the fuel that drives them forward. They don't wait to be inspired. They put themselves in proximity to inspiration. They immerse themselves in knowledge and wisdom, in words that remind them of who they are and what they're here to do. They use their input to shape their identity, strengthen their beliefs, and sharpen their focus, because they understand that a trained, conditioned, and focused mind is the most dangerous weapon on earth in the hands of someone who's committed to greatness. High performers don't look sideways, they look inward. They're not obsessed with what others are doing. They're not scrolling through social media trying to measure their worth against someone else's highlight reel. They don't waste energy comparing their chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 30, because they know that the only competition that truly matters is the person they were yesterday. Every day, they wake up and ask one question: can I be better than I was the day before? That's the mindset, that's the standard. That's how greatness is built, not through comparison, but through consistency. You have to understand comparison is a trap. It robs you of joy, focus, and energy. It shifts your eyes away from your own growth and puts it on someone else's game. And when that happens, you stop building, you stop progressing, you stop owning your journey. High performers know this. That's why they compete with themselves, not out of arrogance, but out of purpose, because they understand that real power comes from tracking your own evolution, from being able to look back a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, and see growth, see maturity, see discipline. That's the reward, that's the goal. There's something incredibly freeing and powerful about deciding that you are your only competition, because now every obstacle becomes an opportunity. Every failure becomes feedback. Every hard moment becomes fuel. When you compete with who you were yesterday, you're not focused on winning someone else's race. You're building your own lane. And in that lane, everything counts. Your mindset, your habits, your language, your level of commitment. High performers don't need someone to chase. They are self-driven. They chase their own potential. They're in pursuit of the highest version of themselves. And that pursuit doesn't end, it evolves. This kind of mindset requires radical honesty. You can't compete with yesterday's version of you if you're lying to yourself about who you were. High performers hold up the mirror. They evaluate. They reflect. They ask hard questions. Did I show up fully? Did I give my best? Did I let fear dictate my decisions? Did I keep my word to myself? They don't do this to shame themselves. They do it to stay aligned with growth. They are their own scoreboard, their own accountability partner, their own competition. And that inner drive is what sets them apart. Most people are so caught up in external validation that they forget about internal transformation. They're chasing likes instead of legacy. They're trying to impress others instead of improve themselves. But high performers know that approval fades, applause dies down. What stays with you is who you became, how you grew, how you pushed, how you leveled up, not for show, but for substance. They don't need to announce their growth. It speaks for itself. It shows up in how they lead, how they love, how they live. When you compete with who you were yesterday, you stay in a state of humility and hunger. You're proud, but never satisfied. You celebrate your wins, but you don't get complacent. You recognize how far you've come, but you never stop reaching. That balance, gratitude for the progress, fire for the future, that's what fuels momentum. That's what keeps the engine running when others burn out. High performers don't need to be pushed. They're pulled by their own vision, by their own standard, by their own desire to keep becoming. And here's what happens when you stay focused on beating yesterday's you. You start to trust yourself. You build real confidence. Not hype, not ego. Confidence that's rooted in evidence. You've seen yourself grow. You've watched yourself overcome. You've tracked your progress. You've done the work. That kind of confidence can't be bought. It's built one decision at a time, one disciplined day at a time, one intentional moment at a time. High performers know this. They don't get caught up in temporary setbacks because they're playing the long game. They know who they were, they know who they are, and they're laser focused on who they're becoming. And the best part, when you live this way, when you compete only with your past self, you win every day you improve. Every rep, every lesson, every breakthrough, it's all a victory. You don't need to outrun anyone. You just need to outgrow your old patterns, outwork your old excuses, outlast your old limitations. That's how you build mastery. That's how you build character. That's how you build a life that's unshakable, by becoming a little better, a little wiser, a little stronger than you were the day before. This mindset eliminates the need to prove and replaces it with the desire to progress. That's the true mark of a high performer. They are never done. Not because they're dissatisfied, but because they're driven. Because every day is a new opportunity to push the line forward, to rewrite what's possible, to raise the standard, to sharpen the edge. They are not chasing perfection. They are chasing evolution. They live in the tension between who they are and who they could become. And that tension doesn't frustrate them. It fuels them. It's not pressure, it's purpose. And purpose creates performance. Real lasting, meaningful performance that comes from within. High performers don't fear failure. They respect it. They don't see it as a dead end. They see it as a doorway. They've trained themselves to reframe every setback, every mistake, every so-called loss into one thing feedback. Because that's all failure ever really is. It's information, it's a mirror, it's a message. And when you see it like that, it no longer defines you. It refines you. Most people stop at failure. They hit a wall, they fall short, they miss the mark, and they make it personal. They think it means they're not good enough, that they don't have what it takes, that maybe this dream wasn't meant for them. But high performers are wired differently. They've conditioned their minds to understand that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of success. It's woven into the path. You can't skip it, you can't avoid it, and if you try to run from it, you run from growth. Every failure carries a lesson, and if you're willing to listen, really listen, it will teach you more than any success ever could. Success feels good, but failure builds you. Failure breaks the illusions. It reveals the weak spots. It strips away ego. It shows you where your strategy is off, where your preparation was lacking, where your mindset needs work. And that kind of feedback is priceless, if you're not too fragile to face it. High performers don't hide from the truth. They don't sugarcoat reality. They don't wrap themselves in excuses. They ask better questions. What did I miss? Where can I improve? What did this experience teach me about myself? How can I apply this moving forward? They treat failure like a mentor. It's not comfortable, but it's necessary, because you don't become unshakable by only doing what's safe and familiar. You become unshakable by going through the fire, falling down, getting back up, and realizing you're still standing. Most people associate failure with shame, with embarrassment, with finality. But that's just conditioning. That's a belief system built on fear, and beliefs can be rewired. High performers do the inner work to shift the narrative. They install new beliefs. That every failure is a stepping stone. That every no is getting them closer to a yes. that the process is more important than the outcome. And because of that, they're willing to try more, to risk more, to move faster, because they're not afraid of messing up. They're afraid of staying the same. You want to know why high performers grow faster? It's not because they're smarter or more talented. It's because they're willing to fail more. They're willing to take the swing, miss and swing again. They're willing to launch before it's perfect. Speak before they're completely ready. Act before they've figured it all out. Because action creates clarity, and failure accelerates learning. The more you fail, the more you know what doesn't work, and that knowledge gets you closer to what does. When you fear failure, you live small, you hesitate, you second guess, you stay in your head. But when you embrace it, you play bold. You get in the game, you make moves. And here's what's wild. Once you remove the emotional charge around failure, it loses its power over you. It becomes neutral. It becomes part of the data. That's the mental edge high performers live with. They can fail without folding. They can stumble without spiraling. They extract the gold from the experience and move on. They don't dwell. They've developed. And don't confuse this with being reckless. High performers aren't careless. They're committed. They're willing to do what it takes. Even if it means failing again and again, they're not chasing perfection. They're chasing progress. Because progress compounds, it stacks. And every lesson learned through failure becomes part of the foundation, part of the strength. The best entrepreneurs, the best athletes, the best leaders, they've all failed. But they didn't let failure define them. They used it, they leveraged it. They let it sharpen their vision, tighten their focus, deepen their hunger. Failure becomes fatal only when you stop moving. When you sit in it, when you wallow, when you make it mean something about your identity. But failure can't touch your identity unless you give it permission. That's the difference. High performers fail, but they don't quit. They fall, but they don't break. Because they know that falling isn't failing, staying down is. And if you're still breathing, still learning, still growing, then you haven't failed, you're just in process. Every high performer you admire has stacks of failures behind their success. Deals that fell apart, launches that flopped, calls that didn't get returned, pitches that bombed, ideas that didn't land, but they kept going. Because they weren't trying to avoid failure, they were trying to find their next level. And sometimes the only way to find it is to crash, to miss, to stretch so far that you slip. That's where the edge is. That's where the growth happens. That's where mastery lives, not in perfection, but in persistence, in the courage to fail forward, in the resilience to keep rising, in the wisdom to see every failure not as final, but as feedback. So when you look at how high performers think, it's not about being superhuman, it's about being intentional. They take full ownership of their lives. They focus on what's possible instead of what's missing. They operate with ruthless clarity and move with purpose. They embrace the discomfort most people avoid because they know that's where growth lives. They feed their mind like it's oxygen because they understand that mindset is everything. They compete with who they were yesterday, not with the world, and they see failure not as the end, but as a necessary, powerful teacher. This mindset isn't reserved for a chosen few. It's available to anyone who's ready to take full command of their thoughts, decisions, and actions. If you want to live an extraordinary life, it starts in the mind. It starts with a decision to think like a high performer. Daily, intentionally, relentlessly. Now go out there and don't just think differently, live differently. Thank you for watching, and remember, your best is still ahead.